Hello everyone, and welcome to today's webinar presented by projectsatwork.com and projectmanagement.com in collaboration with the Scrum Alliance. Where we're going to be talking about the State of Scrum benchmarks and guidelines. My name is Andy Jordan, the president of Refenzian Consulting Inc., and I'm going to be moderating today. And before I introduce you to today's speakers, just want to let you know a couple of little admin things. Firstly, today's session is eligible for Scrum Education Unit, SEUs, under Category E, as well as the PMI's Professional Development Units, the PDUs, under Category C. You'll also receive a link to download the slides after the event. That'll be sent via email, and you can also see there is a download option from within the tool that you're using. If you do have questions, we're hoping to have some time at the end of the presentation for as many questions as we can. We do have a very big audience today, so we probably won't be able to get to everything. But if you do have a question, please use the question box on the left-hand side of the screen, and we will try and get to those. The audio for today's presentation will be through your speakers, so you don't have to dial into a separate number. If you are having audio problems, please make sure that you've got your sound turned on and the volume on your speakers set at an appropriate level. And if you do have any problems, please email customerservice@projectsatwork.com, and we'll try and help you resolve those. Just want to also let you know that there are going to be a couple of polling questions today, so we're going to make you work a little bit for your SEUs and your PDUs, and I'll flag those as we get to them, and we'll be interested in your insight into that. So with that said, let me introduce you to today's speakers. First off, Carol McEwen. Carol is the Managing Director for Scrum Alliance, a non-profit professional membership organization whose mission is to transform the world of work. Carol and her staff work diligently to raise awareness and interest in Scrum, and they fulfill their mission by providing advocacy, community, and education to their members. The Scrum Alliance has over 200,000 members worldwide from the software development community and beyond. We're also joined by Harvey Wheaton. He served on the Scrum Alliance Board of Directors since 2008, and he took up the position of chairman at the start of 2013. Harvey says that he's continually humbled by our amazing Scrum community and the passion that all of the members bring to learning about, advocating for, and practicing Scrum every day. He's also currently the studio director for Supermassive Games in the UK. And finally, our first speaker is Don Kim. He's a researcher for projectmanagement.com. He's an entrepreneur and a business leader, and he has over 15 years of experience managing a wide variety of technology projects. So without any further ado, Don, over to you.
Well, thank you, Andy, for that introduction. And welcome everyone to this really fantastic webinar that's being provided to you by Scrum Alliance, Projects at Work, and projectmanagement.com. For the report this presentation reviews contains information that's really intended to help you make improvements in your day-to-day use of Scrum, plus a set of benchmark results to use as a guide. More than that, we will provide you with a more meaningful way to view the results in light of the insights that we discovered from the data, because we want you to see where Scrum is headed. The adoption of its principles and practices is definitely starting to cross over the boundaries of its software development roots. And this is really not surprising, given that its practices and principles are really highly transferable with a strong focus on customer service. With that, so what are we going to cover today? We're going to cover who we surveyed, go over some of the data. We're also going to cover some of the key adoption factors, as well as the key practices and roles that the survey revealed. More importantly, we're going to start to look at the outlook for Scrum, and we're going to conclude with key takeaways that you can start to use right away. So let's dive into some of the more important data points, and let's start to see what they reveal. So participants from more than 70 countries responded to the survey, with the United States leading the way at 35%, and India at second at 12%. Other notable countries were the United Kingdom, Canada, Australia, which accounted for 4% of the participants, with Germany following at 3%, and other countries such as South Korea, Mexico, Belgium, Brazil, Malaysia, and New Zealand comprising 2%. Furthermore, Although 90% of the web attendees today are from the Scrum Alliance, really only 25% of you filled out the research survey. What this means is 75% who answered the research came from sites such as Projects at Work, projectmanagement.com, or even PMI. What this indicates is that the majority of the research survey respondents really came from the global project management world, which means we obtained a large and diverse sampling. I just wanted to highlight that with you all so you understand the perspective this report is reporting on, and that we will be looking at not only actual practitioners of Scrum, but those who may or may not have heard of it, and even some executives and managers who are expressing some interest in Scrum.
Don, let me bring Carol in there as well. I believe, Carol, that those numbers, that demographic distribution aligns fairly well with the distribution of your Scrum Alliance members. Is that correct?
It does actually aligns very well, and also it aligns really well with the user groups that are out there. Currently we have 255 user groups globally, and it's quite in line with that as well.
Excellent. Thank you. Sorry, Don, I jumped in.
Oh, yeah, not a problem. So what we're looking at right now is that, project managers, in terms of the roles who participated in the survey, led by 31%, and this was followed by Scrum Masters, who were at 18%. And then also following these roles were Program Managers at 14%, and Product Owners at 6%. In that other section, the roles that were included that aren't seen in the graph were PMO Directors, as well as IT executives, coaches, consultants, and various advisors. In terms of industry, and really not surprisingly, IT leads the way at 41%, but some other industries of note are law enforcement, agriculture, oil and gas, equipment rental, and including arts and entertainment. This really indicates a growing interest in Agile Scrum outside of the traditional IT industry. And again, it's really no doubt due to its ability to deliver high-quality solutions quickly and effectively. And as we will discuss down the line, this is becoming an increasingly growing trend. And you all seem to be equally certified Scrum Masters and Project Management Professional certified at 28%. This is the combination of certifications that I personally hold. And for me, and within my own network of colleagues and associations, I think it's pretty common. This is indicative of another common finding that we will discuss in detail, where many of you come from an organization that's kind of straddling Scrum with a more traditional project management method. Some of the designations listed in the other category that we don't see were ITIL certification, Six Sigma, and some of you have advanced degrees in IT management. So Scrum is definitely becoming widespread amongst you, with 80% of you using Scrum in at least one or more of your Agile projects. The more interesting portion of this particular graph is that 60% of you are using Scrum quite regularly. 27% of you use it frequently, and 20% of you use it always. So why do you all use Scrum? Well, customer satisfaction was listed as the highest business priority in Scrum, with 41% of you agreeing. Some other notable priorities are speed to market and managing stakeholder change requests. It is interesting, though, that 9% of you list unknown, which indicates that you all may be part of a company that uses Scrum as its main mechanism to deliver projects, but were probably either hired with it already in place, or you may not have been part of the decision to adopt it. To me, it is a good indication, though, that you desire to participate in the survey to learn more about Scrum's current state, and as well as to understand how it's being practiced elsewhere. So where do they start? Well, there's a common belief that the vast majority of organizations adopting and integrating Scrum come from a waterfall background, and this was definitely supported by the survey, as 49% of you either use Scrum in addition to an existing waterfall method, or use it for some projects while waterfall for the rest. So, and 31% of you had no waterfall methodology in place. And this will segue nicely into our next section.
Sorry, Don. That surprises me a little bit. That 31% of people would not have been using waterfall before. I would think that it would be a smaller percentage than that. Carol, what am I missing?
I think the point is here that a lot of people were using or have been using waterfall, and those people have made the decision to go and try Agile and Scrum. But there's also a large group of people that are organizations that either started right from the ground floor with Scrum. A lot of new businesses have started in the last 10 years or so, and they started that way. So I think that's where we're probably seeing that the difference is there.
Okay. All right.
Okay, so where are you all now? So 13% of you use Scrum exclusively, and it looks like about 23% of you felt that it was actually a difficult transition to move from a waterfall-based method to Scrum, while 25% of your quarter review felt that there were really no clearly identified metrics to identify and measure the successful delivery of Scrum projects. It looks like actually because of this, 8% of you went back to just doing waterfall. So to me, what this indicates is that there's a hard reality out there that organizations want to incorporate Scrum, are usually coming from a waterfall-based background, and you have a need to integrate Scrum alongside, or within the existing methods. This is actually a very common scenario I find myself in when I attempt to deploy Scrum, usually in large Fortune 100 companies. And these companies will typically have a waterfall or some type of SDLC method in place. So while it would be advantageous to keep to a pure Scrum implementation for projects that would benefit the practitioners of that the most, many organizations will need to look at ways to integrate Scrum, either alongside their existing methods or within them. I think also having a way to identify solid metrics and benchmarks will really allow your organization to kind of obsess less about which method or practice is best, and instead really look at applying the right mix of practices and techniques to that particular situation at hand. I think in our report, we talk quite a bit about this, and as well we also get some quotes from actual members who share some of their experiences with it. So let's kind of look at some views on training. So, there was another section of the report where it was noted that 11% of you are in organizations that require certification, and 30% of you are in organizations that, recommend you having it, which kind of indicates there's a growing visibility into the benefits of certification and training, for the successful implementation of Scrum. So really, the majority of you seem to agree that training is important. Yet 41% of you, if you look in the graph here, acknowledge that you're in an organization that does not require Scrum or any other kind of project management certification. But 54%, or over half of you, do feel that having it, actually improve the process and practices of Scrum. Personally, I think having a training program in place with certifications to validate the training is really, to me, a great way for an organization to show its commitment to adopting a method like Scrum, and I think it will definitely accelerate the improvement of processes and practices.
I think that's a key point there, Don. I mean, obviously the majority of survey participants felt that the certification helped, but if Scrum's anything like the PM community that I'm a little more familiar with, there's also tremendous benefit from training that goes beyond that certification. If we think of the PMI as an example, the PMP is clearly a valuable certification, but it doesn't replace the PM skills training. Carol, do you see the same situation in the Scrum community?
I would have to say that I do. I kind of reminds me of a conversation that I had with a friend of mine the other day who just started a new job, and he's a developer. So of course I asked him if his new job he was, on a Scrum team, and he said he wasn't, but he had come from a Scrum team, and he talked a little bit about the, issues that they had with trying to implement Scrum, and that they hadn't even been given the opportunity to get training, but then as they worked through the processes and things and got their buy-in from leadership to send them all on training, that was part of it, and they became successful. But he really found that it wasn't just the training; they had to have the training as the basis. But he found that the community support and the user groups that they were able to go to, and just the general interactions with other people that had been through it was very helpful. So I think that, it's absolutely, training is really key, but also it's only the beginning of the journey, and you have to keep going.
Absolutely.
Okay, so let's look at how participants are actually practicing Scrum. So the report reveals that organizations are increasingly embracing the role of Scrum Master and acknowledging that this role is really different from that of a traditional project manager. And 41% seem to indicate that in the report. But whereas we have 24% have a dedicated product owner, that role seems to be being used in various degrees, and we're going to start. We'll discuss the impacts of this in the upcoming presentation, or in the upcoming slides. So in Scrum, it's a general recommendation that teams have a total of 7 members, plus or minus 2. 71% of you seem to be within that recommended range, but some of you seem to have very small teams with 3 or less. But 12% of you seem to have teams with 10 to 14 members, and 7% seem to have 15 members or more. To me, this could be because you're applying Scrum to a large software project, and/or you have distributed or dispersed teams. So I don't have really direct experience with this. I have heard of instances of this where people are deploying kind of a Scrum of Scrum. So, there used to be a time where sprints took months to complete, and it looks like now it's taking 2 to 6 week cycles. And with 8% of you actually completing sprints in 1 week. In my experience, usually early in your Scrum adoption is where sprints take the longest, and that's usually because you're just implementing the process, and typically have some fits and starts. But another common trend I've experienced is where sprints are typically the longest at the beginning, and get shorter as teams get more efficient and you get closer to start delivering what your customer wants. I think that's really all part of a common and well-known model by this person named Tuckman, who talks about this forming, storming, norming, and performing. And but 6% of you though seem to not know what the length of your sprints are, which may indicate that there's probably some need to start planning the sprints better. But it looks like for some of you that are completing sprints in 1 week, I definitely kudos to you, because the shortest I've ever been able to accomplish that was typically in 2 weeks. So that's a pretty amazing trend there. So the daily stand-up meetings. So 59% of you seem to be practicing daily stand-up meetings, which are now typically known as daily Scrum meetings. But I really like the new terminology, and it indicates that daily emphasis, and the fact that many of us nowadays have probably more virtual teams. I still do like the emphasis of the stand-up idea, and because to me that really kind of exemplifies a really good practice of standing in front of your peers, being alert and awake, and really kind of interacting and discussing what got done, what needs to get done, and of course, looking at the impediments that your Scrum Master needs to remove. Looks like though 18% of you are doing this at various levels, and 23% don't seem to do that at all. These to me maybe indicate that these numbers are indicative of those of you who aren't using Scrum yet.
All right, thanks, Don. So everyone, we're going to give you a chance to contribute now. You've heard a lot of Don's data from the survey that we did. So you should see a survey that's going to appear on your screens in just a few seconds. And we're asking in this first polling question, how often is Scrum used in your organization? And you see there that there are a number of different options from always right through to never. So we will give you a chance to vote, and then we'll give it a few seconds for the answers to come in. Don, while we're waiting for people to let us know what their experience is with Scrum, what do you think we're going to see?
Hopefully, I think we'll see that there's a frequent use of Scrum, is what I would think the poll is going to reveal. But we'll see what the audience comes back with.
Yeah, it's always going to be interesting to see whether or not we get what we expect to see, and I can tell you now that we're seeing some results coming in, and they're shifting around a little bit. There's actually at the moment a very high percentage of people are saying always. We actually have just over a quarter of respondents who just dropped a little bit now, just down to about 24% of respondents are saying always. 30% of respondents are saying frequently, and then about 25% of people are saying sometimes. Those are the three sort of dominating answers. And just as I speak, it's just refreshing again. So sometimes sort of in second place there. But yeah, you're right. It's usually frequently is the most common answer, and then just sometimes just about edging out always. So.
Right.
So on to your insights, Don?
Yes, thank you. All right, so let's go on and proceed to the heart of this survey and report, which is some of the insights and outlooks that we revealed. Okay, so more than 80% of our participants have been involved in at least one or more Agile projects. So it's really no surprise that the majority of use Scrum regularly. Scrum is usually implemented at the project level, but we've also seen that it's increasingly being deployed at an overall organizational level. But the reality is that organizations that want to incorporate Scrum, like we mentioned earlier, are usually coming from a waterfall background. So we really need to think about integrating Scrum alongside or within existing methods. So 24% seem to use Scrum for some projects while using waterfall for the rest. 13% of use it exclusively, whereas we indicated 31% indicate no use of waterfall at all. But one of the key findings was that 23%, or almost a quarter of you, felt that it was difficult to transition from a waterfall-based method to Scrum. So in the report, we actually cited a survey done by PricewaterhouseCoopers, and they seem to indicate a similar sentiment. In addition, incorporating a way to measure progress for projects your organization is undertaking, whether through Scrum, waterfall, or combination thereof, I think will really be helpful in letting you know which is best. And that seems to be indicative of what our survey participants noted as well. Because almost a quarter of you, or 25%, really indicated that there was really no clearly identified metrics to identify and measure the successful delivery of Scrum projects. But nevertheless, industries outside of software development even are starting to increasingly adopting Scrum, and we're going to go over some exciting examples of that in a little bit.
I think that's a really interesting development there, Don. What are you seeing, Carol, in terms of the interest level in Scrum outside of sort of the traditional software development areas?
Oh, great question. Well, because over the last couple of years, the gatherings that I've been to, we have offered sessions and topics from outside of IT and software development based on the feedback from previous events that we've had, and people have asked us for those. So definitely been making sure that those opportunities are available, and also at the gatherings, the open space sessions always generate discussion outside of software. I don't have exact numbers, but I would guess maybe about 20% of the sessions in open space and such. And I had the opportunity to speak with several people at the last gathering in Las Vegas, and I was surprised to see the number of people I spoke to that were from outside the IT industry. And coupled with that, talking to some of the CSTs recently, they've been commenting on how the level of interest in their class attendance has shifted to include a much larger number of people outside of software development. But one thing people are asking for is more feedback on real-life examples of outside of software. So don't be afraid, for the people that are out there and have those examples that they want to share. We're here to help get that word out and share those with everybody. So, it's quite interesting to see the switch or the change.
Excellent. Harvey, we've let you off the hook so far, but anything that you wanted to add to that in your experience?
I think Cal's covered it really well. Definitely, again, just anecdotal experience of sort of kind of corridor conversations with the sort of people that we're meeting at gatherings and events and training and that kind of thing. Really wide interest in it. And I think as well, the other thing I would add is, as well as across different industries, even within a single company, interest in using Scrum for different business functions is another sort of really interesting area. And certainly personal experience in the companies I've been in is using Scrum to run anything from sort of the core business operations really through to sort of IT. There's a whole bunch of stuff that it's just all those principles that are really applicable to. So parts of business as well as different industries, I would say.
Excellent. All right. Thank you. Don, back to you.
All right, thank you. So let's go into insight number 2. So insight number 2 is really about the roles and practices of Scrum. They're actually very simple and well-defined, but as we find out, the practices can be quite difficult. So although Scrum is, more of a mindset or adoption of a culture, with kind of these rituals to make that culture thrive, there are definitely specific roles and practices, that are really vital to the method. These roles and practices are quite simple, well understood, but the reality is that our participants seem to be following them in various degrees. So, 41% of our participants were in organizations that had a dedicated Scrum Master role, and this role is, definitely the most well known and understood. And as we talked about earlier, organizations are increasingly embracing the role of Scrum Master, and starting to acknowledge that this role is really different from that of a traditional project manager. But we did find in some instances, though, that was revealed in the report, that the product owner may represent multiple customer requirements, but also has a responsibility and authority to reconcile conflicting requirements and also to determine the business value. About 38% of our participants had a product owner role that was working in this capacity. 15% indicated that the product owner works directly with the team, when that role really should be to motivate teams, with their clear business goal, and not really to be directly involved with the work. And furthermore, 22% indicated that there was no product owner role at all. This may become problematic and kind of indicates that more education and awareness of this role is needed. And one other interesting thing is that Scrum really does not define a software engineering or development process, as that would really defeat the philosophy of Scrum being a lightweight, flexible, and adaptable to a wide variety of complex situations. So really one of the best practices is to use Scrum as a wrapper around an existing improvement software engineering practice, standard or method. And our participants definitely seem to agree, because the majority of them use at least one or several extreme programming practices in conjunction with Scrum, with things such as test-driven development, pair programming, and continuous build and testing and automation. 37% of our participants actually practice continuous build and integration on a daily basis, sometimes even multiple times a day. So the recommendation we can take away from this is that Scrum roles and practices need to be followed consistently. These variations or tailoring of Scrum may or may not be reasonable representations of the original method. And these are colloquially known as Scrum butts, which led to that well-known Nokia test. So, our evaluation so far has been, for the most part, focused on, practices, roles, and tools of Scrum. And while these are, really important, really the bigger picture in implementing Scrum really lies in creating that culture of empowerment, self-organizing teams, as well as continuous change and improvement. So Scrum, really like all Agile methods, is really less a collection of practices than a way of thinking and establishing a specific kind of working culture. And usually what's cited as a reason why practices such as Scrum succeed is having active executive support, as well as having senior leaders provide a clear set of business goals to be achieved with a method like Scrum. And almost half of our participants were in agreement with this, citing other important adoption measures such as alignment with financial goals, smooth transitioning process, and really having clear metrics to quantify success. So obtaining executive support is critical because it provides a crucial background support you'll need to be an effective, Agile leader and implementer. And really getting their support and commitment to change requires selling them on value that will be delivered through Scrum that really resonates with them, such as, having a more disciplined and consistent delivery of projects. You may be an organization that doesn't have any processes or practices in place, and you kind of do projects with varying results. I think, Scrum will really allow you to pursue consistent and successful delivery of projects, and that'll resonate with your, your executive leaders. Or you may have a methodology, that's struggling to keep up with the volume and volatility of your work. So, you're going to look for a way to deal with projects that need a quick turnaround, but also have have minimum requirements definitions so you can, start to deliver projects with high quality and value. So, really when this all becomes kind of the new normal, then I think you really know that you're on the path to being successful at Scrum. And despite the variations with our, participants' implementation of Scrum, half say that, they're very likely to use it in the future. And this indicates to me that, the workplace use of Scrum will continue to grow.
Let's bring Harvey back in there, and Harvey, I'm sure that you agree about the importance of buy-in, but what from your experience can we do? What's the importance of gaining that buy-in at the higher levels of the organization in order to see Scrum succeed?
Thanks, Andy. It's a big area, I think, for many people. I absolutely do agree. It's important. I think especially for organizations coming from a more traditional project management background, the waterfall, and that seems like a big majority from the survey. This is a big change going into an agile and methodology and using Scrum. Is not just a technical change. It's a big cultural and mindset transition, really. So I think what you often see with teams is they maybe find it easy within the team to start using Scrum in a fairly bottom-up way, and they'll take some practices. They kind of sort of appeal and work well for them. But Scrum, all the bits are designed to work together, and it needs all those components. And I think some of those, I can think of several that people will struggle with without that kind of senior level support. Things like getting the product owner role in place and right, typically outside the team's control, that role, and the culture in the whole organization, and kind of going back to something that Carol said earlier, getting some funding for training, for support, for going to events, and kind of really transforming the culture inside an organization. And I think without that support, I've certainly seen many places, I know people on the call have seen this probably as well, you either get less benefit, that's the most optimistic view of life, or it risks stalling, or someone in senior management waking up one day to see what's going on and think, I don't like this, I don't feel in control anymore, I want to kill it off. I just kind of answer, sorry, a fairly long answer, just finally say, in many ways the answer to some of these problems is actually within Scrum itself, because it is about delivering working software frequently and quickly, being very close to customers and delighting those customers and getting them on your side and being allies, and measuring and keeping on improving. So I think if we do those things and build outwards, people will take notice and hopefully we'll get some support for what's going on.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. All right, so it's time for our second polling question now. So in just a few seconds, you should see the next survey out there for you. And this is asking you about Scrum's rate of growth. We're asking you to look into the future and let us know what you think growth is going to be for Scrum over the next 3 to 5 years. Carol, I'm sure you've got some thoughts on what we might expect to see here.
I do have some. Thank you, Andy. I expect to see a very high growth in the use of Scrum over the next 3 to 5 years. Scrum Alliance has been experiencing extremely high interest and growth, as I mentioned before, with an increased interest outside of software development. And in the last, say, 4 months, we've been averaging more than 100,000 new visitors to our site. And more importantly, we've seen a steady growth of certified members in excess of 5,000 a month. The one interesting thing is at the gathering in Atlanta last year, John Miller ran a session about Scrum in schools, where a school in Arizona was doing a pilot and taking the Scrum framework into the 4th grade classroom. And the pilot went so well that they introduced it to the entire 5th grade level. And I recently watched an interview that John Miller did with the principal of that school, and this is what he said. He said, Scrum is beyond a tool. It is a life mechanism. It is not going to help them learn only what they are learning, but it is going to make them want to learn anything and everything that comes their way. Ultimately, that is what you want. You want children to love and learn to love to learn, is what he said. Learning their entire life. So when people like John Miller and a host of others who are passionate about the power of Scrum and see how it can help to transform the world of work in areas far beyond software development, I can't imagine that we wouldn't see significant growth for many years to come. And I'm really interested to hear what the audience thinks.
Well, I think you'll be pleased. The audience and you are clearly aligned in your thinking. The results are frankly startling. 46% of people projected high growth, 49% of people projected moderate growth. So 95% of the audience thought that there was going to be moderate to high growth in Scrum. 4%, or just under 4%, thought that things was going to stay about the same, and only 1.3% projected a moderate decline, with no one at all, no single vote for a large decline. So that's pretty telling, I think. Don, that's probably it's pretty amazing, eh? So Don, take us home.
Okay, great. So with that polling question and result, it segues very nicely into this next section, which is the outlook of Scrum. And the report definitely, will reveal some pretty interesting things from that. So really, Scrum really does equal that ability to adapt. Why? Because in our current business climate, speed and flexibility have really become ever more imperative. Despite the global economic slowdown, management is still confronted with the critical task of analyzing and improving the ability of an organization to change, survive, and grow in this complex global economy. This coupled with the accelerated technological advances and an ever-changing socioeconomic condition is really going to spur organizations to continuously adapt to their environment, if they are to survive and prosper. So, agile practices are really a key adaptation that organizations are making in the face of heightened business complexity, globalization, and constant change. So really one of the central principles of Scrum is that projects reside within a business climate these days and industries that are in a constant state of flux and change. Things are not as static as they once were, but are actually highly dynamic and even disruptive. So, organizations, and this is regardless of industry or business sectors, that will have a higher chance of success going forward are the ones that are able to respond quickly to change and actually to start exploiting it. I think the agile mindset that's expressed in methods and practices such as Scrum, must be driven by this overarching vision and strategy, really that lies at the principle of how one reacts to change. So really, your job as a agile leader or Scrum implementer is really to ensure that you have the necessary ingredients in place, such as an environment that's conducive to agile. And if it's not there, do what's necessary to allow your teams and customers to respond to change. Like any good Scrum Master would do, to remove those impediments that prevent you from leading this kind of agile initiative. So, there's already indications that Scrum is being adopted outside of the software development community. There's one article titled, Agile, Social, and Cheap, the new way NPR is trying to make radio, from the Nielsen Journalism Lab, and it's published back in April of 2012. The author, Andrew Phelps, discusses how, the new NPR Vice President of Programming, his name is Eric Nussum, really decided to use Agile to develop programs that gave listeners more of an opportunity for active involvement, while also delivering more quickly and economically. Scrum was primarily the method used to model, how they wanted to deploy radio programs faster, right? So the typical way before that was they'd go through a whole RFP process, they'd have to plan everything ahead of time, and the budgets just kind of grew, too big. So having a more agile way of deploying these radio programs allowed them to deploy this, much quicker. Another adoption of Agile, outside of software development, presents itself in this article titled, Agile Reinvents Retail. And it was published by John Hitchcock of fanhill.com back in September 2012. And this story describes how a California retail outlet called Odysseus, used Agile principles to deploy retail operations. And you would normally think you'd use Agile to do things like, deploy the store's point of sale, or some inventory management system, or some kind of financial system. But what they really did is they use the principles really and practices to kind of completely define that retail experience. I mean, they use the principles to build out their retail operation, and it allowed them to be flexible and open to customers' feedback, and also allowed them to be more collaborative with its target market. And then most importantly, it made their whole process change ready. And of course, another recent and famous example of Agile and Scrum being used outside of software development is really embodied in the sports car called WikiSpeed. It's built by this individual, or led by this individual named Joe Justice, which is a really terrific name. And he's a software engineer by trade, and he led a team who entered the 2008 X-Prize competition. And this automobile was deployed using Scrum and crowdsourcing. So the team was able to place in 10th place in this really crowded and highly competitive environment. And this was done by getting a working prototype in only 3 months for a car that went from 0 to 60 in less than 5 seconds, that weighed only 1,400 pounds, and had a top speed of 150 miles, and got 100 miles per gallon to boot. And it was all using Agile practices and techniques just like Scrum. So, second outlook is definitely Scrum is going to continue to grow because, it's part of this whole thing called the age of the customer, right? So in this book titled The Leader's Guide to Radical Management, Reinventing the Workplace for the 21st Century, which in my opinion is almost kind of a manifesto on the business adaptation of Agile, this management guru named Steve Denny writes, about this idea about delighting the customer as being the central focus, for Agile wherever it's applied. This kind of melding of technology and business has kind of created this new form. It's this kind of project management technique or practice that will be more really strategically focused on delighting the customer. So, in this report titled Competitive Strategy in the Age of the Customer, published in June 2011 by Forrester, which that graph with the arrow there is based. They call this the age of customer, and that's where that whole idea came from. This is where the focus on things like manufacturing to distributing information, in the evolution of industries, really going to give way to this kind of customer-obsessed management. In other words, it's really a management model that goes from focused on managing things, traditionally with like products and services, to really managing that whole customer experience. Therefore, your role as Agile leader is really to do everything possible to delight the customer, end users, and stakeholders. Because even if Agile development and project management kind of came formally into being, back in 2001 with the Agile Manifesto, the software development community, it was done because they needed this to adapt to a more efficient and effective method to accommodate the increasingly complex and dynamic business environment for which their software was being developed for. And this was one that was being shaped by the very technologies that those software development projects were creating. So it really makes sense then that other industries from manufacturing, marketing, finance, and even government, which in our earlier presentation we saw indications of, have or are starting to adopt the Agile methods and practices and even principles from the software development roots. And this synergy really should not be surprising, since really what lies at the heart of Agile is that obsessive focus on the customer. And really any business these days that's worth anything has this as their meat and potatoes core strategy. So at the conclusion of our presentation here, some of the key takeaways that we can think about. So definitely Scrum is more widespread, and even some of our polling questions, were indicated this. Scrum is definitely growing rapidly, in software development, and definitely beyond. We've seen some examples of some industries that you really wouldn't readily think of as being pertaining to Agile and Scrum, such as radio program deployments and retail outlets, creating a cutting-edge prototype automobile, but it is. And Scrum is really easy to understand. Its principles and practices, can be actually defined in less than, I think, 5 pages. But it's really hard to master. And we've seen some of the variations and roles, like the product owner role, that people are still coming to learn. And really, the keys to success, we talked about, is getting that buy-in and support from leadership. Our participants indicated that same sentiment, and even some of the participants who responded to the questionnaire or to the survey indicated this. So it's really about creating that culture that facilitates Scrum, and of course, getting all the training and community support that you can get from great sites like Scrum Alliance, and hope this presentation opened your eyes to some of the exciting new things that are going on in Scrum.
Thanks, Don. I think it's been an amazing presentation, and you clearly have sort of struck a chord. We have a huge number of questions, which we'll try and get to. Now, just for the benefit of the audience, please, if you do have questions, please use that question box on the left-hand side of your screen to submit them. We do have over 100 questions already, so we're not clearly going to be able to get to everything in 10 minutes. But every question that you submit will be captured, and we will follow up separately. We'll work with the various experts at Scrum Alliance and figure out how best we can respond to the questions that have come in. So please, we want to hear from you if you do have any questions about this. But let me get on and start with as many questions as we can in this little bit of time left. So let me start by picking this one. And Carol, I'll throw this one to you first. What can we do to help the organization better understand the importance of roles like the product owner in Scrum, especially in organizations where they think they've already got a product manager role, so don't necessarily need a product owner in Scrum speak?
Well, I answered this question just the other day. I was talking to somebody about it. I think it goes far beyond better understanding the role of the product owner and actually understanding how all the roles and the relationships between them work. And that will help them understand why they need a product owner and what the role is responsible for. And I tell people to remember there are only 3 roles in Scrum: the Scrum Master, the product owner, and the team. So I think the one thing is that there's a misconception that a Scrum Master is a master of Scrum, when in fact a Scrum Master is a role on a Scrum team, just as a product owner is a role on a Scrum team. And I like to use an analogy to say, have you ever tried to sit on a three-legged stool with one leg missing? It doesn't work very well. So we have to help organizations realize that having a Scrum Master without a product owner is like having a three-legged stool with one leg missing. You'll fall down. You probably won't see the same type of success that you would have if you, have a product owner, a Scrum Master, and your team working together. Like Harvey said a little bit ago as well, it's how we practice the core principles that will drive the success, and people will see the benefits. So it's not just one role or the other, it's how do we make them all work together.
I love that stool analogy. Harvey, anything to add to that?
Carol's covered a good amount for you, actually. The data was interesting in the survey, I have to say. It is pretty revealing, and to me, from my sort of read through it all, it does support exactly what's being said there. Around about twice as many organizations have dedicated Scrum Masters, or teams that have dedicated Scrum Masters. The amount of training Scrum Masters get compared to product owners, again, kind of 2 to 1. So it's kind of all happening. Clearly we haven't got something quite right in how the criticality of the roles are communicated, and I think things Carol hit on are absolutely spot on. And also kind of something, I guess I said earlier on, I can see how teams can perhaps get started with Scrum without the product owner, and kind of be doing okay to a point. And that doesn't perhaps help the urgency of getting that role right, but I just reinforce it's just so critical to get right. And it's the person on the team as part of the Scrum team that's deciding what we're building. So somebody's doing that job. I suspect maybe some people are doing that job and not realizing they're almost doing a product owner role. I don't know, but yeah, definitely critical.
Yeah. Okay.
Andy, I have another quick point to that, is that I think in one of the slides that Don talked about was about 20% of the people that are using Scrum that are really using Scrum exclusively. And the interesting point from our perspective in Scrum Alliance stats are that there's about 20% of the people get trained as product owners. So that's kind of an interesting correlation there as well.
Yeah, that's true. All right, so next question that's come in. Harvey, let's throw this one at you. Don said that Scrum's not always practiced as prescribed in its implementation. Do you think that's because of evolution and or enhancement of the concept? Or do you think it's more a case of having to compromise in order to gain acceptance?
Well, I think it's a big topic area. A lot going around in my head when you ask that. The first thing I'll say, and I'm sure there are people on the call that have seen this, if people do go to or look at any of the forums or explore the conversations that go on around Scrum, I think the community is kind of divided into what I guess you'd call purists and pragmatists, the people that think that we absolutely have to do everything completely by the book from day one, versus those that find themselves just having to make Scrum work inside a different environment, as Dom kind of described really. So I think, standing back from that for a second, I think there's many reasons why it isn't practiced in a pure way. When we look at the percentage of people coming from a more traditional background, a more waterfall background, I guess you can see why, again, people would take some of the practices, but maybe not all. And definitely if you start bottom up in a team level, some practices are much more appealing. So for example, the daily stand-up meeting, there's a whole bunch of stuff there that just is quite appealing to developers and just works really well. That being said, I think also looking at the data around how Scrum is practiced, it's interesting to see that it's not really being applied perhaps in a way that's prescribed as frequent as you would hope to get the benefit that Scrum is designed to give people. So it made me smile really when I saw things like the number of people holding daily stand-ups but not doing them daily. Well, the clue is that it's called a daily stand-up and it needs to be daily. Continuous integration, fascinating topic, but I guess like the frequency of sprints, the world is getting faster and faster, and I think continuous integration for some companies that I speak to absolutely means continuous, not daily or weekly or less frequently than that. So I think there's definitely maybe a lack of understanding or a lack of application of that. And I think the biggest thing we need to really help people understand is the core of Scrum is pretty simple. There's lots of great stuff surrounding it that we can do. Get that core right. It all works together in a pretty holistic way. You'll start to see benefit, and then you can start to explore some of the other sort of practices that surround Scrum. So I hope that's a slightly long-winded answer to the question, but I hope that covers most of the...
No, I mean, it wasn't a question that you could answer in 3 words, I think.
No.
I am going to jump straight on. I've got a couple of minutes left. Try and get one more question in. Carol, I'll throw this one at you. And actually, I'm going to take a couple of questions that we've got, and I'm going to collapse them together. It's about stakeholders. One person asked, what can we do to convince the skeptics within an organization about the benefits of Scrum? And then another question came in that was asking specifically about what we can do to help customers understand the benefits of Scrum when they might be a little bit reluctant to see their project managed that way. Carol, any thoughts on those situations?
Sure. I think my suggestion is for those of you who are on the call and have success stories to share them. Make them available to the community. SA is always, we're always looking for the next success story to feature and help people understand that there are, people have struggles out there, but there are a lot of success stories to share. So the other suggestion I might have is have the customers and leaders attend a gathering or speak with organizations that have achieved success. I love talking to the folks who've been successful in transforming their workplace because their enthusiasm is usually off the charts, and you can't help but feel like something you have to try when the conversation's over. I mean, it's just, when you go to a Scrum gathering, people don't just go and listen to the sessions. They're talking about it outside. They're, from the second they get to the event till the time they leave the event, when they go to dinner at night, it's all talking about, how to be more successful, how can we get, delight our customers some more, and that kind of thing, and it really is contagious. So I suggest that, and don't forget to start the conversation, I guess, to your stakeholders that how you can increase both customer and employee satisfaction. That'll get their attention. So
absolutely.
I guess that would be my recommendation.
Yeah. Now, Carol, the full report that's associated with this data, I believe the Scrum Alliance is going to be making that available to people.
We will absolutely be making it available. There'll be an email going out to all those who are registered, and it'll also be a link on the website. And I think we'll probably have that out definitely by the end of next week. That report will be posted and available for everyone.
Excellent. And I apologize to our audience. I know there were a lot of questions that I didn't get to, but please rest assured we have captured everything, and we will follow up, and you'll hear from us with how we're going to try and answer as many questions as possible. So the only thing that remains for me to do is to thank Carol, Harvey, Don, and in particular to thank everyone for attending. Really appreciate your time today. Thank you for joining us and for making it such a valuable session. And please join us again for another Projects at Work, projectmanagement.com, or Scrum Alliance webinar soon. Thanks, everyone.